us realizing and contending and really internalizing that our hands are soaked in blood. Like, truly, our hands are soaked in blood. And so this was just a part of my reality of like FBI raids, having friends and family members that were killed in the West Bank. So it wasn't even a question of, am I going to be a part of this movement? It was a question of how. My name is Jinan Chehade. I'm your everyday pal.
It's cool.
Yeah, I think beyond the titles, the first thing I always tell people is where I grew up, and I grew up right here in Little Palestine, Bridgeview. And the reason I always start with that is because honestly, it made me who I am today. I mean, I grew up right down the street, actually right down the street from here. You know, it was the khatus and the amos that made me who I am. It was the after-school programs, like learning about the Nakba. I always joke that I knew the date of the Nakba and the Naksa before I even knew my own address. It was, you know, doing Debka at lunch with my friends in Universal. So it was really this community that made me who I am growing up, Little Palestine. And I also grew up in a very highly politicized environment, obviously, growing up in this area. I remember when we were younger, FBI ICE raids and surveillance was just another part of our day. Going to protests, whether it be for Gaza or the anti-war protests for Iraq or for Syria, was just like another part of our day. So it was just this constant reality that kind of we were here for a very specific reason, and we had a greater purpose. I'm also someone whose family instilled in them the idea of leading with purpose and being very intentional about everything from a very, very young age. I'm also a Muslim Arab woman, so that ties a lot into my identity and who I am. Whenever people find out that I'm not Palestinian, they're always very confused. And that confusion actually always shocks me. Just because for me, I've never really separated my people, whether it be I guess in Lebanon or Morocco from the people in Gaza. You know, I live about a 15-minute drive from the Palestinian border. So the question is, who placed that border, and who is the ones that told us who we care for and who we don't care for? At the end of the day, for me, these borders are really just a colonial relic, and creating these barriers in my mind never felt natural, because really it's not natural. You know, succumbing to these colonial barriers and even within our mind really only fragments our people, and a fragmented people is a weak one, and a weak people is one that is easily controlled by our colonizers. So no, I've never separated myself from the people, whether it be in Gaza or in Yemen or even across borders. I remember when actually Lebanon was being attacked in September of 2024, and there was airstrikes on our village in Lebanon, and people kept on asking me, like, are you okay? Are you okay? And that within itself actually confused me, because wallahi, I told them I did not feel more heartbreak and pain for the airstrikes in Lebanon than I did for the people in Gaza. Because every shaheed in Gaza, for me, had this thing of a family member. Every shaheed in Yemen, in Syria, in Lebanon had this thing of a family member. Because even we see this now within the youth, we have never succumbed to these colonial barriers or, you know, separated our people. So I think, yeah, when people ask me like who I identify with, the easy answer is to say I identify as an Arab and a Muslim woman. But even past that, and I think this is really important, is what Gaza has taught us, and what I've learned the past 21 months is that my quote-unquote people are not just limited to like a certain region or a certain religion, but it's simply people who stood by me, you know, who stood for truth and justice. I remember when I was held for 18 hours in jail overnight, when I was having my hijab.
We're going to go into that.
When I was arrested, when I was held in jail for 18 hours, and when I left at 4 a.m., it was people from across different backgrounds that were waiting to greet me and hug me. So what does that mean? And what does it mean for the people of Gaza to be having Black Lives Matter protests, you know? What does it mean for people who are in ICE protests wearing kufiya? So how are we kind of identifying ourselves and attaching ourselves to colonial barriers, or how are we breaking free from that colonial mindset and understanding that, you know, these barriers were created by our colonizers, by our oppressors, to keep us like fragmented and weak? My first memory was actually going to an anti-Iraq war protest when I was about 3 years old, 4 years old. And as we know, the anti-war movement, whether it be for Vietnam, even for Iraq, has deep ties in the Palestinian movement. The reason the encampment started was because it was inspired by the anti-war movement. But I don't think there was actually a specific moment where I was like awakened to the Palestinian cause, just because it was literally a part of my identity. It was a part of my everyday living and breathing, like being in this community. Again, I remember like being very young and having Muhammad Salah, a community member, be taken by the FBI. The Holy Land Five, who were imprisoned for literally giving to Palestinian orphans. So this was just a part of my reality of like FBI raids, having friends and family members that were killed in the West Bank. So it wasn't even a question of, am I going to be a part of this movement? It was a question of how I was going to be a part of this movement. I literally do not remember a reality that doesn't include Palestine. But I will say though that there was a moment, and this is interesting because I think for a lot of people, their awakening was October 7th, or just October, the start of the genocide in general. But for me, my first memory of realizing that I can't be like just passive in this occupation. I wanted to be a person that was involved in movement was the siege on Gaza of 2014. I remember sitting with my dad watching Al Jazeera and watching airstrike after airstrike fall, similar to the images that we're seeing today. And I remember telling my father, turn off the TV, because that feeling of helplessness, and I could have been more than like 13 years old, but that feeling of helplessness and frustration, it killed me. And I remember in that moment being like, I will never let myself and let Gaza down in this way of giving into my helplessness, of turning away, of turning off my screen. So ever since then, being involved in SJP, AMP, even starting LSJP at Georgetown, starting SJP Chicago here in Chicago, I realized that it was up to us to not be passive about our condition. Nobody was coming to save us, that's the thing that we have to realize, that nobody is coming to save us. Like, it is up to us to be on the front lines of this cause.
These people, these young, they don't have no clue.
They're living in a different world, and I think it's like an intentional ignorance, and it's something that Israel and America thrive off of. But because of that, I literally, starting in, I think it was October or November, of realizing like how fast people were forgetting, I started a notes app in my phone of things I have seen in Gaza, just so I don't forget like every heartbreak of literally ice cream trucks filled with corpses, beheaded babies, a little girl begging for food.
What's the first thing that you have on?
The first thing I have on here is newborns left to die in incubators, as we know in Al-Shifa Hospital. It keeps going. The thing is, like, this notes app keeps going, and I'm not sure when I'm going to stop jotting things down, but I know I don't want to forget any life or any atrocity, because that is what the people of Gaza deserve, and even what our justice and our humanity deserves, that we will never forget and we will never forgive. For every single crime, there will be justice.
I'll show you.
I've actually never showed that notes app to anybody, but it's always in the back of my mind, and I'm always adding to it. So,
you pursue law.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because, again, my entire experience with the law has always been a negative one for me and my community, whether it was FBI raids, surveillance, deportations, disappearances post 9/11. So for me, going to law school, I wanted to reclaim the law for my community. I wanted to, the law for me was a tool that was weaponized against my community. So I wanted to take that tool and actually use it to advocate for my community. So kind of flip it on its head. So that was my main reason for going to law school. But obviously, when you go to law school, and especially at this time, the rainbows kind of fade a little bit, and you realize at the end of the day, the law itself is meant to uphold a very certain structure and a system. And again, this is probably like we can get into the next question, but yeah, it's just about, for me, it's about knowing the law's limitations, and the law cannot function without the people pushing the movement forward. Does that make sense? I think people rely on the law as a tool of justice, But the law has, again, what's happening in the streets right now is not separated from the law, you know? The law is like the highest codifying force. Okay, sorry, forgive me here, because like, again, the law and what's happening in the streets are actually not mutually exclusive, but in turn they influence one another. The law is the highest codifying force. Once something is written into law, it's very hard to be undone. So what we're seeing now in the legal field is that the law has to catch up with the people. And for me, I kind of rebranded my role as a lawyer is to redistribute the power of law to the people, right? Is to work within movement to uplift the people and not for it to be used again as a tool to dispossess our people. And I think the reality of it is that international law is used to uphold the genocide, and that's like point blank. International law is used to uphold the genocide. The U.S. has vetoed a ceasefire resolution 5 times with the United Nations. There's been over 49 resolutions that the U.S. has vetoed with any criticism of Israel. So what does this mean for me as a lawyer is that I don't put all my hope in the law. And that is a reality check that I think a lot of us in the legal field have to have. Of the law isn't, again, it's not coming to save us. But what we do have is that the power of law to redistribute it to the power of the people, right? To leverage it. And I think this is what I tell a lot of young lawyers. You know, I've been speaking at different like law schools and everything like that, is that yes, the legal field at this moment is a very harsh environment. But at the same time, we as attorneys, as law students, especially at this time where we're seeing the weaponization of immigration law to deport, you know, any people that support Palestinian human rights, when we're seeing the legal field criminalize support for Palestinian human rights, it's up to us to be on the front lines and to be behind our people like a mountain, right? We cannot crumble in this time and be like, you know what, like there's nothing I can do as a lawyer. I work in big law, I work in contracts. That's not actually the reality, is that there is a space for every single person, especially within the legal field, with the power that it has to, again, leverage that power for the people. And I always say, as someone that's been sued, arrested, surveilled, and suppressed in many different ways, I have never felt so hopeful about the future of a Palestinian liberation when I look at the youth, when I look at this chance for us to really redefine and reframe the legal field to what it can be.
Good point. Where were you arrested? Here?
So I was arrested, in Chicago, during an action at O'Hare. And I think it's interesting because when people see my role as an activist, as an organizer, you know, at protests, at direct actions, they always see like there's no way this person can also be a lawyer. But I think what's important to understand is that this is what this time calls from us, that we all do have a dual role. I always say that my 9 to 5 is inside the courtroom, you know, and then my 5 to 9 is outside the courtroom, in the streets, banging on the walls of the courtroom. And that those two roles are not, they don't combat each other, but they actually complement one another. And I think I've been going back to our history a lot just to have some clarity on how do we navigate this time. And every, you know, revolutionary movement, especially in the Algerian liberation movement, in the anti-apartheid movement, it was lawyers who were also on the front lines. It was academics. It was not just people who we quote unquote say, oh, they're the activists, let's just leave them to do the work. It was everybody all at once coming together to push this liberation front forward, and that is when they truly achieve liberation. So I think it's up to all of us to reflect of how are we limiting taking action to a select few, and how are we encompassing it in all of our identity in our everyday life, which is what Gaza demands of us and which is what is needed of us at this time. So
these things that come into it, but how are you dealing with all of that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I guess I'll start with the story in general, but people forget that I was, even before October, I was very involved in the Palestinian advocacy and working towards liberation. But so I knew anybody who has been involved in movement knew what October meant, that the wave of violence coming for Gaza was going to be something that we've never seen before. And it was not a time for us to sit and wait, but it was a time for us to amplify and get to work, which I did. And then end of October, and again, just leading up to this, to give context, I had just graduated from Georgetown Law. I had worked at Foley that previous summer, and I was offered a full-time position. So I'd worked there for 3 months, and how it works is that you sign the contract, you take the bar, and you come back. So I had taken the bar, alhamdulillah, I've passed. And then come October 7th. So by the end of October, the head partner at Foley and Lardner actually gave me a call, and she said, we've been seeing everything that you've been doing, and we need you to come into the office for a meeting. And I'm not gonna lie, back then I was very naive. I really thought that this was gonna be a teaching moment, that I was gonna tell them about Gaza and how I was worried for my family and everything like that, and the history of the occupation in general. But unfortunately, when I walked into that meeting, I knew that this was not their intention at all. As soon as we sat down, they pulled out like a packet of screenshots of my social media, my speeches, my background, my identity, and they interrogated me about my involvement with SJP Chicago, my background, again, where my dad works. And ultimately, they framed my advocacy for Palestine as supporting terrorism, which, as we know, is a very racist smear with no factual backing. And later, it was especially problematic because there were other partners at the law firm that literally advocated for Israeli violence. And they were not called into a meeting, they were not interrogated for hours, and they were not fired as I was. So I think after I was fired, and again, just to give context, this was a job that I had worked 3 years to get. You would literally have to interview 3 years before. It was callback interview after callback interview. This wasn't something that I could just pick up and find another job. And I was relying on it in many different ways. So I kind of sat with it for a while and just tried to know what was my next steps. But during this time, like, the genocide in Gaza was also going on. And I remember, and I will never forget, in that same week, we lost Reem Ruh. She was killed. And we also, Wadi al-Fayumi, our son, our community member, was also stabbed 26 times, a 6-year-old, for being Palestinian and Muslim. And for me, that was kind of another wake-up call of this really wasn't about me. This is about how we can set a precedent that for people who look like me, for people who advocate for Palestinian rights, they are not your pawns to throw away as you see fit. That we will demand our accountability. That, it's interesting now because Palestine really is the mainstream. For people who don't speak up against the genocide, that should be controversial. Frame the assumption that speaking up against the genocide, that advocating for Palestinian rights is to be criminalized, is no longer in line with the current climate. That those who don't speak up for Palestine, that's what should be controversial. So for me, that's when I knew I wasn't only going to speak up about what happened to me, but I was also going to pursue a lawsuit of discrimination against Foley and Lardner. Again, to set that precedent that we will demand accountability in any space. But I think the part, and just to give you background, because I get this question all the time, but the lawsuit still is ongoing right now. We are currently in litigation, and we'll really prepare to take this fight to the very end, because again, this precedent has to be set that this kind of discrimination against Muslims, against Arabs, against those who speak up for Palestinian rights is not to be tolerated, whether it be in the law, in a law firm, in a doctor's office, for students, that we will demand our justice and accountability. But when it comes to a personal note, and I'm not gonna lie to you, like, talking about the personal toll that's had on me, it doesn't come naturally, and it's very hard just because, what's the loss of a job compared to what we're seeing in Gaza? But there are things that nobody really considers. People look at the story for maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, but everybody moves on, and you're really left to pick up the pieces. And for me, like, just talking about even simple as like the financial toll, the emotional toll that it's had, the fact that my career will never be in a place where it's been before. I had, family relying on the finances from this job, and it was up to me to kind of figure that out. So it's definitely a lot, but I think something to realize is that this job and like the path that it put me on was kind of like a dream of mine. It was my family's like I made it moment, that we had reached the top. But something to realize here is that every single person in Gaza has dreams, has ambitions, has hopes, just like you and me, And our dreams, our passions, our ambitions are not more valuable than theirs. So for people that always ask me, like, when they hear my story, they always assume that, like, I'm just different, But trust me when I say that I had the same, I was just as invested in that job as you are in your job. I was relying on it just as much as you are. But so are the people of Gaza, Everybody that has had to abandon their hopes, their dreams, their university, their schooling, they are not more deserving of life than we are, So that's something that comes to mind of every time somebody asks me, like, do I regret it? The easy answer is no. I will never regret being outspoken about Palestine, and I am not interested in a future that doesn't include Palestinian liberation, point blank. And I'm not interested in being in a space that doesn't see Palestinian life as valuable. And even my dad always tells me it's all about balance. It's about balance because he sees the personal toll that it's having. But I honestly think I can't be mentally stable until this genocide ends a little bit. It's difficult for me to function in a space of thinking completely for myself and my future when every time I open my phone I see the scattered limbs of children, literally. So I think, but at the same time, with that caveat, and I always tell organizers and people in movement like you, is that there's going to be a tomorrow. Today might not be Palestine's Day, but there's a tomorrow, and we're in for the long haul, truly in the long haul when it comes to this movement. So, and we need everybody strong. And I'm not talking about all you're not allowed to feel, but truly it's okay to take care of yourself and to make sure that you're in a position to fight the fight tomorrow, Because a lot of us, I hate using the B word, the burnt out word, because I think people use it really easily, but we've been on emergency response mode for 2 years, and that's something that's really unprecedented in this movement. It's always been a few weeks, Jinan Chehade, or a few weeks when Jenin was attacked or something like that we're functioning on emergency response, and then after that we're doing a more long-term strategy. But I think at this time we have to realize, again, we're in the long haul, and if we can't, I'm talking to myself, honestly, and if I can't find a way to function in this crisis and this chaos while being okay, then it's up to us to take care of that, because, I just think every day I'm it's gonna come, the ceasefire, but then I'm wait, I'm not even waiting for a ceasefire. For me, it's about liberation. So I need to be able to put myself in a position where I am able to fight the next week and the week after that, and not completely burn myself out. So,
what keeps you going? Not what you think of?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think for me also would 100% be my faith, and it's interesting because I was talking to my dad the other day about Gaza and what we're seeing as the worst stage of genocide, truly the starving of the people of Gaza. That just 2 days ago I saw a child literally die on my feed from hunger. How do you contend with that? I scrolled and I saw another child eating sand, and my dad told me Baba, all these people, they're in a place that's much more peaceful than this, and they have more relief right now. But what does that mean for us? How are we going to answer these big questions of what we did when Reem is brought in front of us, when Hind Rajab is brought in front of us on the Day of Judgment? I ask myself, what am I going to answer? Am I going to look down in shame, or am I going to have an answer for them? So for me, it would definitely be my faith. I also think about, you put it so beautifully of just putting in the effort and leaving the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think about the hadith of, if the Day of Judgment came and you had a seed in your hand, then you should plant it. And that just really reminds us that even in the darkest of times, when it really feels like the world is over, it's still up to us to plant those seeds, to continue the fight, because we never know what barakah, what blessing is going to come from any of our efforts, that even if it impacts one person in Gaza, that it's worth it. It really is worth it. So, and just the ultimate idea of knowing that liberation is guaranteed for us. It's not like a when or an if. It's it's not an if, it's a when. Liberation is guaranteed for us, and I truly believe that is within our lifetime. Like when I see this amount of destruction and devastation and something that we haven't seen in our modern history, it shows that this is an unraveling force, this decolonization that's happening, Israel and its death and destruction, it's on its way out. So I do believe that liberation is within our lifetime, and it's up to us to decide. It's interesting, sorry. I was just thinking about like my dad, again, my dad is one of my biggest sources of inspiration, but he told me once that, but like change is like a train, It's going to get to its destination whether you like it or not. Palestine is going to get to its destination whether we are part of it or not. So we have to decide for ourselves is, do we want to board the train? Do we want to be a part of this? I always tell people, like, this movement doesn't need me, I need it. I need it. So that's what we have to decide for ourselves is, do we want to put ourselves on this train? Do we want to be part of this journey? Because it's going to come, liberation is going to come, change is going to come, whether we are part of it or not. So
whether they know it or not, it's like the constant reminder of like, we're here and we're not going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because always when, I remember once I was in Tammy Duckworth, she came to the Mosque Foundation to send her regards for Wadi al-Fayyumi's death while she was voting to send more weapons to Israel. And she was she is one of the most staunch Zionists that is backed by AIPAC. And I kind of sat at the meeting and I told her, I was like, you are here to give your regards for Wadi al-Fayyumi when you are literally funneling this system that has dehumanized Palestinians and Muslims that has led to his death. So no, we don't want your regard. And to that she said, I will never stop giving money to Israel as long as in office. And I literally told her, I was like, expect us everywhere. Expect us everywhere. In the streets, in law, in medicine, in the news, in your office. And we did. We went to her office a couple times. And actually just yesterday, Tammy Duckworth, she actually voted no to send more money to Israel. And I'm not giving her any credit, but I'm saying this is the power of the people. When we say expect us everywhere, when we put them to, put that pressure on them, it might not happen today, it might not happen tomorrow, but sooner or later, our truth will remain. So in that way, whether it be like green laces or wearing a kufiya or speaking up in a classroom, like this is what it means to make Palestine unavoidable. Wherever they go, there we will be, looking them in the eye and telling them truth.
Never.
Yeah, I actually always get this question from students, from elders, from everyone alike. And I think it's a multifaceted answer of, first, knowing that Palestine really has become mainstream. You know what I mean? It has almost become, in certain spaces, very controversial not to speak up for the genocide. And even when I talk about post 9/11, all this unprecedented attacks that we're seeing, whether it be in the law for students, this is nothing new. This is a replication of the post 9/11 era of just completely crushing any dissent. But I think what's different about this time is that we as a community are no longer caught off guard. This time there's an entire defense infrastructure, right? This time we're more united, more connected like ever before. When I was fired, there was an entire legal committee that came together to make sure that how can we connect her to other jobs? How can we make sure she's represented? When I was sued by Zionists, and a lot of people don't know this, but I was actually, September of 2024, Zionists launched a baseless lawsuit against me and other pro-Palestinian organizations. And right when that happened, again, there was an entire legal committee that came together to make sure that we had defense. So we have power, we have people power. We are not alone in this fight anymore. So if somebody, picks at you, if somebody fires you, it doesn't mean that you are alone in this fight, that there's an entire army behind you. But also with the caveat of speaking up for Palestine does not always mean that you're going to be fired. But also I want to say with that, the reality of it is speaking up for Palestine does come with a lot of risk. I'm never going to shun that away. But I think what's more important at this time is for us to really think about, it's really a time of deep introspection. To think about what are we doing? Really, are we living just to work and die, or are we living with purpose? What are we running after? if you really you assume that your job, your career, your degree or anything like that is more valuable than your principle, your faith, your belief in truth and justice, then it's almost like it's a time for deep introspection. This is a time for us to be bold, to be brave. Us silencing ourselves and minimizing our truth is only going to serve our oppressors. So for me, yes, I lost my job, but I sleep restful at night knowing that I have not lost my soul, So I think for all of us, it's a time to understand that despite the repression, despite the attacks, despite the firing, the doxing, we cannot forsake Gaza. Because if we forsake Gaza, we forsake ourselves. We forsake our faith. We forsake our entire world order and reach for justice and liberation and the global liberation movement in general. So if we forsake Gaza, we forsake ourselves at the end of the day.
Yep.
It's really interesting when people ask me this question, and I have to say this, but truly I am not worried about this generation, the youth. Even in my job, I see it as a lawyer when I tell students the risk, and they're like, okay. And anyway, we're gonna plan this, okay? So I think Trump and the Zionist agenda have made a severe miscalculation. Truly, they've made a severe miscalculation because the youth have nothing to lose. This is the same generation, they just don't care. The youth don't care. This is the same generation that was raised in active shooter drills. This is the same generation that saw the 2008 bombing of Gaza, the 2014 bombing of Gaza. And now every morning we wake up and we see babies being torn apart, starved, mothers carrying pieces of their children. The youth have nothing to lose, and they're operating with complete moral clarity. So I think this is something that the Zionist agenda did not expect whatsoever, that even despite the repression, despite the attacks, it's really backfired because it's only emboldened the youth to work for Palestinian liberation at whatever the cost. And even when it comes to this repression, I always laugh when I see Trump, the executive orders that he's passing, because they're really telling on themselves. It really is. They're telling on themselves that Trump had to change the entire legal order to punish a few students. Really had to change the entire legal order to punish a few students. So this chaotic, if I want to say this chaotic repression and attacks is only distancing Trump and the Zionist agenda from their own appeal. Israel relies on public appeal and legitimacy from the American people, but how hypocritical they're being, how just insanely chaotic and violent and repressive. Even the American audience is whoa. This is a lot. This is a lot. So it is even distancing themselves from their agenda and their appeal in general. We in the US, as we know, are complicit in this genocide, and there's no way of sugarcoating that. The US, since October 7th, has given $18 billion to Israel, as we know, has vetoed a ceasefire resolution 5 times. Every bullet that went into Hind Rajab's body, 355 bullets, we have paid for. Even when we see the starving kids of Gaza, that is by our tax dollars. So I think it's really us realizing and contending and really internalizing that our hands are soaked in blood. Truly our hands are soaked in blood. And how dare we sleep soundly with our bellies full, surrounded by our families, seeing the images that we're seeing in Gaza. When we say that we're one body, we're one ummah, one body, is this just rhetoric, or do we truly encapsulate the alarm that we should feel upon knowing that one of our limbs is suffering, that one of our limbs is dying? So that's something that keeps me of knowing that this is not a choice, this is a duty, this is a responsibility upon every single one of us. And I think the other really important thing that I think about is our movement has fallen into this cancer of defeatism, right? That there's nothing, we tried everything, there's nothing more we can do. But really, that's just us not realizing what role we have to play in this movement, that we, as settlers in the belly of the beast, we as people who enjoy the comfort American imperialism has offered us, do not have the privilege of falling into despair because we have not tried everything. That we have the most potential living in the belly of the beast to make it an inconvenience for the system to continue supporting this genocide. How dare we say there's nothing more we can do when we are literally in a prime position to be able to end this genocide? So I always tell our organizers, students, youth, break yourself from this cancer of defeatism. We have not been defeated. There's actually this quote by Stephen Biko. He's an anti-apartheid organizer from South Africa, and he says that the greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressed is controlling the mind of the oppressor, right? Quote unquote. I don't know if those was direct terms, but I always say that, us feeling defeated, of falling into despair, only serves the Israeli agenda. This is what they want. And our greatest weapon, truly our greatest weapon in this movement is our ability to endure, to keep going. And that's why we literally go every single Saturday and protest in Chicago. Because we are here to say that we are awake, we are awake. We will not fall into despair or defeatism, that we will be with Gaza every step of the way, and we have not given up. And it's so important to understand the strides that our movement is having as well of, McDonald's, Starbucks are taking millions and billions of dollars in loss on a weekly basis, Politicians, even our own senators here in the Illinois, right? Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth are one of the only senators that have voted to block weapons to Israel. And this didn't come out of a coincidence. This didn't come out of nowhere. I can't tell you the amount of times I was outside of Dick Durbin's house, protesting, outside of Tammy Duckworth's house protesting. Again, this is a very long-term movement. So I think, it would be those things of duty, responsibility, knowing that our power is in our endurance. And finally, from in a very personal, vulnerable level, I also can't tell you the last time I've been able to eat without guilt. I've been able to sleep soundly. It's almost like the color of the world has been lost a little bit in the past 21 months for me. I always say that we have died 1,000 times before. We die in the morning upon seeing a mother carrying her child in shrouds. We die in the evening upon seeing a child dig in the garbage in Gaza for food. We die in the evening with a father losing all of his children. But what I was reflecting on the other day is really what a blessing it is to be able to be heartbroken for Gaza, to know that your heart is still beating and still caring for the world, despite so many mechanisms trying to ensure the opposite. So just know that, for me, this heartbreak that we feel is only a reminder that we are alive, we are awake, and we still have deep care for this world. So I guess that's how, along with my faith, I think those are the things I think about. Exactly, and I think first I get this question a lot of what should we be doing? What should I be doing? And the answer is not just a 1, 2, 3 perfect blueprint, because everybody's role looks different and multifaceted. But what we realize at this time is that every single person must be activated for Gaza. Again, we cannot limit action for Gaza to a select few, that all of us need to be activated for Gaza in all spheres. But I think, especially in Chicago, and people ask me this all the time of why are we still protesting? Nothing has changed, everything like that. If it was simply for the fact of Gaza seeing us and knowing that we have not forsaken them, and knowing we have not given up on them, that in itself would be enough. But in terms of what should we be doing in Gaza for Gaza, and we talked about this, but I think the answer simply is I need every single person to obsess over this question of what should I be doing. It should literally keep you up at night to know what should I be doing for Gaza, what did I do today for Gaza, because the stakes are that high. Every single person should analyze and reflect upon their space, their tools, their resources, and understand where can I add in this space, what gaps can I fit in. So yes, every single person must be activated for Gaza, and even more than that, we all need to be obsessing over this question of what can we do, what more can we do for Gaza. That is truly that is the care that we need to show at this moment. And even in Chicago, there's so much amazing work being done, from Illinois divestment campaigns to, different grassroots movements, to boycott movements, to different long-term campaigns, to arms weapons manufacturer campaigns. So there's so much important work being done, and there's so much work to do. But the point here is that every single person must be activated. And the point isn't to ask, like, I always get that, what's the point? What's the point? Don't ask what's the point, ask what's left if we give up. Truly, what's left if we give up? We say, you know what, these protests are making a difference. Everybody stay home. We just stay home on our Saturdays watching, surreals of children dying. Is that our alternative? Or are we awakening ourselves? Are we making sure that we each have a role and are activated for Gaza? Something that I was thinking about, I guess, and seeing on the news is that, like, I think what Israel has done in the past 21 months is completely erase the notion of a red line. That there is any semblance of humanity, that this is the red line. That, bombing hospitals is the red line, or that starving children is the line. There is absolutely no red line left that Israel hasn't done. So I think what is up to us is, if there is no red line, we are going to redraw it. If they are not accountable to the international legal order, to any kind of legal order or accountability, they are accountable to us, the people. So this is why I say, like, make Palestine unavoidable in all spaces. Every single Zionist, every single politician or weapons manufacturer that has aided and is complicit in this genocide, expect us everywhere. Expect us everywhere, because we will not forgive or forget. I forgot to say that I really want the people in Chicago to remember is the last words of Hussam, the journalist, who was killed by Israel because he was a friend of many in Chicago. Hussam Shahfad. Yeah, he was a friend to many in Chicago. He was a journalist that never gave up and that was ultimately killed by an Israeli airstrike. And the last words that he said, and these words always replay in my head, is, I ask you now. And this was his message to the world that we should not forget. He said, I ask you now, do not stop speaking about Gaza. Do not let the world look away. Keep fighting. Keep telling our stories until Palestine is free. So for me, every time I feel like giving up, or, even at a protest, sometimes I feel like, what else is there to say? I remember these words of Hussam, that there is always something to say, always something to do. And that was his will to the world. So how can we not follow through for it? No, but I was going to say, the reason I'm involved in this movement is not only because of the love, that we have for the Palestinian people, not only because of my family and where I grew up, but even speaking when it comes to, like, historically, Palestine is the manifestation of imperialism, of colonization. It is literally the poster child of what the epitome of imperialism and colonization looks like. So trust me when I say, like, Palestinian freedom will be the unraveling of colonization, of imperialism in all its form, because Palestine is at the center, It is the greatest manifestation. So I truly believe that when you fight for Palestine, you're also fighting against, ICE and Trump and the Western imperialism. When you fight for indigenous rights, you're also fighting for Palestine. Any time, and I always think about Ghassan Kanafani's quote when he said, imperialism has laid its body over the entire world, right? He says its arteries are in Asia, its limbs are all throughout, the Middle East, and whenever you strike it, you damage it, and you serve the world revolution. And that's really why I'm involved in this movement. When I work for Palestine, I truly feel that I'm working for Kashmir, I'm working for apartheid, against apartheid everywhere. So it's really the manifestation of everything in terms of what liberation and justice looks like. To the people of Gaza, you might not know my name or my face or who I am, but I know you. I know you by your steadfast smile. I know you by the hands of the mothers that continue to braid their children's hair in the middle of a genocide, by the fathers that come out from under the rubble to dig their own neighbors out. I know you by your kindness, your resilience. So, to the people of Gaza, I ask you to forgive us for not stopping this genocide. But to the people of Gaza, I want you to know that you are Ruh al-Ruh, that you are the soul of souls. and that we will never forsaken you, we will never abandon you, and we will continue this fight, this struggle, not only for the ceasefire, but for liberation, until the day that we wake up and we hear your laughter instead of your screams. So, and also I would say to the people of Gaza, you have changed the world. You are the unmasking force. You taught people how to be kind and graceful, yet strong and resilient. We truly owe you everything. So you may not know me, but I have memorized every single one of your faces, every single one of your names. And we here in Chicago, we will never stop this fight for you, for Reem, for Bisan, for Hussam, for Anas. You know, when we see these faces and these names, these aren't just for us, you aren't just names on our phones. You are our brothers, you are our sisters, you are our mothers, our fathers, and we are affected by every single wound you have. We feel the same pain. So I ask you to forgive us and to know that we will be here every step of the way, and until, inshallah, we are met in a better place.